And I hate you partially, okay, for supporting Trump. Okay, don't ever forget that, all right? Give me like one policy that Elon Musk supports that is not like directly in line with his interests that you think is like beneficial for America. What is the equivalence on the left? Give me your worst. Like, is it trans athletes? What is the thing that drives you on the left? You're like, man, these people are crazier than the right.
Paul Pelosi thing, right?
Oh, God.
The guy gets attacked, and the New York Times put together this great graphic, which shows like the kinds of people who are implying that he was hanging out with a gay prostitute. Tucker Carlson, Ted Cruz. It's not like just Alex Jones or whatever.
Yeah, whenever I go on Peers and I'm saying like, hey, Donald Trump said this, DeSantis says this, Elon Musk says this, they're like, okay, well, what about this?
Yes,
I think 2-year-olds should be trans. And it's like Martha Johnson on Twitter, 7 followers, 18 likes on her tweets. Like, what the f is wrong with you?
I argue with these people more than you do. I mean,
but you support them. How can you think this is a better vision for the United States? How do you think these people who are totally untethered from reality, how is it the better party? I appreciate this guy because I think that he has his own brain, which I just appreciate. That is the thing that is the thing that I appreciate more than anything in the entire world, because he's not like a guy who's like, oh, I'm a centrist and I fight with both sides. He fights a lot with conservatives on Twitter, and I appreciate that. But he's conservative as well, and I appreciate that. Wow, hey, what's up? I'm doing great. What are the... Shut the f up. You voted for it, motherfucker. You voted for it. You should feel ashamed, okay? You should feel horrible about that.
It was just, there's some Indian guy on Twitter called Indian Bronson who just has this tweet like, I'm one of the good ones, basically. I feel I'm doing that. I'm one of the okay MAGAs. You see, Trump just tweeted some PC claptrap. He's retweeting, posting Elon Musk's tweet saying, anyone from any race, nationality, creed can come to America and do something great. This is progress. This is not stuff that Trump went out of his way to highlight before the Elon Musk effect. So this is, it's progress. I think MAGA might just be evolving.
Oh yeah, is that how you view that? Okay. There was another Indian Twitter account who seemed pretty upset about things. What was it called? I think Vivek Ramaswamy. Have you ever heard of that guy before?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've heard of Vivek. He told them to stop having sleepovers. Yeah, they turned on him fast. They are not happy with what's going on. And I mean, I've always told you, I've always said that there's like just this nasty hatred at the heart of this stuff. But there's also like the Silicon Valley guys are not into this. I mean, they're personally offended by this. You could see this. And
no, but they get it. But they're retarded in a whole other way. There is no politically intelligent Silicon Valley. They're all macroeconomically retarded dipshits who think that like crypto is going to be the new reserve currency of the United States, and who probably just want to have like, my guess is some kind of like FTC favors or whatever is in charge, FEC favors for their crypto bullshit. Right? That's my guess. I don't know. Like.
Some of them, some of their ideas are sort of out there. I do think at the same time, I mean, they get most things right. They get the high skill immigration issue correct. They're in the industry.
No, they don't even get it. They get it correct by way of luck. They get it correct because they know that, because in their monkey brain, okay, all these people are monkeys, except for the black ones. I would never say that. All these people are monkeys, okay? In their brain, they say H-1B in, okay, cost of labor down, business good, therefore H-1B support. That's like where their brain goes. Because I'm curious, if you were to ask any of these Silicon Valley guys, like, hey, what do you think about? Because people do this thing. I don't remember, real quick, can you refresh it? What is your like background for whatever, like school or journalism or work?
I was an academic. I was an academic until a few years ago.
Do you say what area you were an academic in?
Yeah, political science.
Okay. I'm curious if you were to ask these guys, because there's this weird feeling in the United States, I don't know, maybe you feel this way too, where people are like, high skill immigration, good, low skill immigration, bad. Like there's only certain workers that we need, but not other workers, even though we have like a hunger for like all workers. If you were to ask these Silicon Valley types, hey, I know that you're in favor of H-1B, what do you think about low skill workers coming over to work? I think they'd be like, well, that's probably not good because they're stupid. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that if you polled these guys, they would be favorably disposed to low-skilled workers. I mean, I agree with you. If you've ever hired like a nanny or like some kind of housekeeper or something, I mean, this has kind of radicalized me on immigration. There's some Americans you can find there that are good, but usually like the sort of the quality, and I'm sure like it's like this in every industry. Just having a nanny is like the only thing that I've experienced in hiring besides like a editor and so forth. But yeah, I mean, so you're right. I think the high skill immigration thing is more important. I mean, you could have one person come in, like Jensen Huang, who founded NVIDIA. His dad immigrated to the country. His mom was a school teacher. His dad was just a normal engineer, not like sometimes they say, oh, we need the top 1%. You didn't know that Jensen Huang was going to be top 1%. You had no way of knowing that
Yeah.
when his family immigrated, or that the kid would be that spectacular. You're right. I do think they get other. I mean, I do think they get other things correct. I mean, I
Name
think
one
that,
thing. What?
Elon Musk knew that California was crazy on the COVID restrictions. He moved SpaceX there over that. This is a trend that you're seeing across the country where people are leaving the high tax, the states with building restrictions, the states with the tougher organized labor laws, the states that had, again, COVID restrictions at the time. And he was correct. I mean, he knows what it takes to run a business. I mean, he's not the only one who's moved from California to Texas. The population flows are going from these more restrictive states to these more economically free states. And
Sure.
look, he has like experience with it. He's built several successful companies. He knows sort of, and I think generally it's not always that the interests of business and the interests of society are hand in hand. But look, SpaceX, Tesla, these are absolutely wonderful companies. X, maybe not so much.
Yeah, listen, I'm the number one Elon hater. Okay, you'll never find somebody. I think this guy should be arrested and his company should be expropriated. Okay. This guy.
You don't think that he personally is responsible for Starlink? He's responsible for more.
I was gonna say I am the number one Elon hater, okay? But I do give him credit for Tesla and SpaceX, okay? I think America launching rockets is really cool. I think it was really sad that America went to the moon in '69 and then we were relying on Russia and China, I think, to fly our astronauts to the ISS. That was not good. So I'm glad that we have spaceships again. I think Tesla legitimately moved the electronic vehicles industry forward at least a decade. I know that other people say, well, there were other vehicles, but nothing to that scale. So I'll give him credit for that, 100%. The issue that I have, this is a big issue that I have with political conversations. I don't think that he was right on lockdowns. Unless he was saying things and I missed it, I don't think almost anybody was right on lockdowns. The issue with having any of these policy discussions is nobody can ever approach these discussions with reasonable motivations in mind for their adversaries. If you want to say, I'm about to say something, but never said it all in all of the COVID lockdowns. If you want to say, okay, I think that those lockdowns are too much, okay, because I think these guys are just like playing it too safe or whatever, or they don't have the adequate data to support these policies, and we could probably open up earlier and be safer. This is a great conversation to have. That would be an amazing conversation. It would be an amazing conversation now to have, but that wasn't the conversation. The conversation was, oh, notice how they lock you out of their churches, but they allow you to go to BLM riots. Notice how they want to steal your freedoms, and the state is just trying to crush you and make it so vaccine passports are forever, mandated so that they can inject mRNA vaccine chips into your children's penises and turn them trans. It's like, Jesus. There were no reasonable conversations about any of the lockdowns because everybody assumed that the other side was acting just like in the most insane, malicious, bad faith ever. When in reality, it was just like a worldwide pandemic and nobody really knew 100% what to do. That drives me insane. And I think if Elon left California, it was just over taxes, I think. It was like 95% of the reason.
So look, I think early on, I'm pretty forgiving as far as lockdowns and, February or whenever it started, March 2020, April 2020. I think that after about 6 months to a year, and they weren't doing lockdowns at that point, but here in California, we had mask mandates for school children literally for years. Literally for years.
Wait, no shot. For more than 24 months? Children were state mandated to have masks? Is that true?
At least LA County and San Francisco County. It might not have been the whole state, but around here, you would drive around to a school outside, they'd be playing basketball, and the kids would be masked. It was ridiculous. It was 2 years into the pandemic. I don't hold me 24 months, but at least 20 months. I'll say it's at least something like that.
Okay, I'm pretty sure I lived in California until 2022. I feel like I don't remember that, but maybe. But okay, go ahead.
Look it up. I live close to a middle school, so I could see the kids walking back and forth with masks on. And yeah, I have kids, and we had masks at like the Children's Museum, which was outside. We had it for a very long time.
Sure.
And so we had data. So okay, first of all, there's a retarded version of this. They're going to inject mRNA and make you shed. They're going to shedding, and they're going to kill us all. I mean, there is obviously that. There was a reasonable position which people like Ron DeSantis took, and after like a year, we could go back and we can look and we could see that to lock people down, to make people mask all day, there has to be, I think, overwhelming evidence for that. It's not like it might help or it might not. I think you need really strong evidence. And there was not strong evidence at the places that were harder. Sometimes you would delay and it would come and then it would go. Like places like New Zealand and South Korea and Japan, they were able to shut things down and they were able to actually keep the virus out. But there's no evidence that within America, like it mattered that like Florida opened up the schools right away. California went to and not only masks. I mean, for years they were doing like California for at least a year and a half in LA County. They were doing remote learning like two days a week or something like that. I mean, it was really, really, really slow. I think people if they don't have children.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and argue. Like I think that retroactively or retrospectively, a lot of the school lockdown stuff was probably not good. Maybe any of the school lockdown stuff was not good. Maybe that should have never been the case.
It was clear early. It was clear early, not like the first month, but like 6 months.
I disagree. I disagree to say that it was like so clear that it was clear early. I think that there were still teachers that were worried about being infected by students. I think that was one of the arguments that like the teachers unions were using. Like how true that is, or how true that isn't. But like let's assume that like we had enough evidence to say that we probably could have opened it. I don't like that our political conversations, or maybe I guess I don't know. We can fight about this. I don't think that the people who were still pushing for mandates were doing so with the hope that they could destroy the American economy and bring them all under to heel so that they could control them with. I feel like people might have fucked up and made maybe even bad decisions, not just misinformed, maybe even bad decisions, but this automatic assumption that it's like this conspiratorial nonsense. Like DeSantis was one of the people saying that he wanted to like prosecute Fauci if he would have been elected president. I don't think Fauci did it. Also, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I do think there is a conspiratorial sort of tendency on the right. And that was obviously, it was proven false too, because look, eventually they didn't lead to a great reset or take away your hamburgers or whatever this was supposed to lead to.
Notice how they always say this. Notice how the conspiracy theorists end up being correct about everything, but they were right about nothing. You notice that there were no mass mRNA vaccine injuries. There were no mass permanent lockdowns. There were no permanent vaccine mandates. There were no permanent vaccine passports. Like none of that happened. But somehow they still notice how we were right about everything.
Well, they say Alex Jones was right about. That's what they say. Alex Jones right about everything. Yeah, he rants for like 6 hours a day, sort of free association. And
yeah,
they think like, but they can't even.
And by they, you mean Joe Rogan has said this. Yeah, Jesus.
And but I mean, I agree with you, but I do think it was. I don't think the leftists were. Enslaving us to Klaus Schwab or anything like that. But I do think it reflects something. It's a mistake that I think like is actually telling, and not just schools. Talking about the universities. I mean, universities they had masks for a very long time. They had COVID. They had basically remote learning, all that stuff. I do think this like reflects something that was just. Especially after the vaccine became available, and this is the position I take, was like I think the vaccine is so good that like the risk became small, and still we had mask mandates in LA County after like Omicron. Omicron was the end of 2021, and Europe did this too. Europe screwed this up too. So you're still doing mask mandates, 6 months, 8 months after a vaccine is available. And like, I don't think that was a reasonable mistake at that point. I don't think it was a conspiracy. I think they're just sort of blindly just, scared and neurotic and not wanting to do anything different and sort of
potentially, there might have been things there. So this is another reason why I hate conservatives and I hate you partially. Okay, for supporting Trump. Okay, don't ever forget that. All right. I feel like I'm half joking. No, I'm not. Never mind. Okay. I feel like
we're here. We're discussing. I'm acknowledging to you all their problems. I could say I hate leftists because I could point to some Luigi Mangione and say, and this is sort of why I hate you too, Steve. Listen,
if you would have just got him at the Trump rally, I would have been okay with it. All right. If Brian Thompson would have been one of those. Okay. Listen, if the issue is, I'm a big cuck believer in the. Like that tension creates some type of harmonious society, right? That employers should be trying to scam their workers, and that employees should be trying to take 2-hour shits in the bathroom to scam their employers, right? That this type of tension between like worker and boss and left and right and labor union and industry. Like I think that this type of tension is good because ideally through the fighting we kind of like solve issues and we're forced to reckon with the other. other side's contentions with their issues. I think one of my biggest complaints about the right veering off into literal fucking fantastic territory of everything being a conspiracy now, which it has been for years now, is the left. Even though I would argue that Kamala and Biden are relatively moderate, at least compared to the left on Twitter, their economic policy does go quite a bit to the left of me. I'm not a big fan of like, hey, we're going to fix this problem by giving everybody stimulus on everything. It's like, okay, well, this probably doesn't seem like the best solution ever. But I don't know why I would ever expect their policies to change unless they literally self-moderate, because they have no right-leaning party to argue against. There is no real policy-driven conservative movement to argue against, right? I think it would have been interesting to see what this country would have looked like if there would have been conservatives saying, hey, we have data out now. These counties opened early. They're not having, issues. Like, we should do this and blah, blah, blah. Like, I think that those types of arguments would have played out much better rather than, oh, we're still in lockdown? Well, Fauci better count his fucking days, because as soon as I'm in office, we're locking this motherfucker up, because I know he made $400 billion investing in Wuhan's Chinese virus for us,
Yes. I mean, Steve, you're talking to the right guy here. I mean, I funded a study that Philippe Lemoine did about basically a data analysis of lockdowns, trying to do the cost benefit analysis, saying that they didn't make sense anywhere. You had to make sort of absurd assumptions about how many lives they saved for it to make any sense. I wrote an article on 40 years of economic freedom, looking at economic measures of economic freedom and which states have been growing faster and where the populations have going. I agree with you completely. I mean, they fight the mRNA vaccine. The one thing that Trump did right, that liberals now acknowledge that Trump did right. I mean, I think this is an important distinction between the sides. Like, I think liberals are more likely, at least established liberals, are more likely to acknowledge when empirical reality shows that Trump did something that was actually good. Yeah, but they're scared of vaccines. It's kind of a low class, less educated influencer, TV watching, more like memes and social media sort of brain melted movement now. And yeah, it sucks. What can we do?
Well, we could not support and vote for Donald Trump. I don't understand how in your mind. I view these people as destroying my country.
You want me to make them smarter? Don't you? What do you want? No smart person? What are you want the complete brain drain to be complete?
I need these people to be gone from my country. I need MAGA to be flushed down the toilet. I need a reasonable conservative party again.
They're not. They're half the country.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not going to die. Trump is going to be president for 4 years. You should want like some people like talking to him. You should want Elon Musk, saying good things on high-skilled immigration, at least some other things he'll keep Trump sane.
If it was the case that I felt like these were intelligent people that were moving Trump in a direction that was good for the country, I think I would feel okay about that. But the issue I'm having is that, one, every single political science or economic macroecon, especially, every take I hear from Silicon Valley is guaranteed to be the most retarded thing I've ever heard in my entire life, every single time. And it's like, okay, well, if these are the guys yanking Trump's chain when it comes to trade policy, okay, or when it comes to the Federal Reserve, like, fuck me, right? I don't know if these guys are advocating on behalf of the American people or just their companies. And now I feel like I'm a crazy leftist because I'm not even a guy that typically talks about that. But you have to admit, it's a little bit rich coming from the party. There's also this whole like, I'm kind of like casually calling this like emotivism or whatever, where when somebody says something, I'm trying to figure out like, what are you actually communicating? Because there's no relationship to the actual words that you're saying. How is it that the party that was worried about corrupt elites and lobbyists and money buying politics now have the richest people in the world who are, walking in and out of Mar-a-Lago every day and whispering to Trump's ear? How am I supposed to believe that a guy, no offense, but like a South African immigrant who has hundreds of billions of dollars of net worth tied up in individual companies has the best interest of an American citizen in mind?
I mean, so I do think, and there's a couple things here. First of all, there's a lot of corruption. I mean, within Trump, you don't even have to go to other people, right?
Sure.
You have even like things that are maybe not technically corrupt, like hawking Christmas ornaments and NFTs. I mean, this stuff is really,
and shoes and pieces of every single suit that he's worn, and the gold. Yeah, Jesus, yeah.
It's amazing stuff. At the same time, like, someone's interests are going to be listened to. So, I mean, Democrats are often, it's not the richest man in the world. They'll have, trial lawyers. They'll have labor unions. They'll have public sector bureaucrats, right? I mean, like Elon Musk versus the teachers union, like who has a better sort of vision for America? In my opinion, it's Elon Musk. I don't think I think the teachers unions are horrible. So, just because there's this one guy on that side and he has an interest that, he has a lot of power on, questionably, I don't think that's dispositive. I mean, I think you're going to find groups with all kinds of interests on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, again, I go back to that tension thing. When you say, like, who has a better vision for America? I don't know what Elon's vision for America is. And I think that, like, teachers, unions are there at the end of the day to fight for their employees. That's it. They're not good. They're not bad. That's just what they do. They represent employee interests, a group of employees. The problem is I don't know what the vision is for America. I don't know what Trump's vision is. And I don't know what a tech bro Silicon Valley's vision is. I'm just not sure.
I think it's pretty. I don't know. Around these guys, I see these guys. I think there is, like, Musk. I think he has a pretty transparent vision. It's a sort of libertarian kind of techno utopia where we send rockets to, outer space, and we have electric vehicles, and we have fast growth, and, we build a lot of housing. I think there's a lot there that, he spends a lot of time on Twitter, and maybe you don't see that all the time. Sometimes he's under bad influences. But I think underneath it all, there is a kind of, like, libertarian, techno-utopian vision. I don't think there's, I don't think it's difficult to understand what this actually is.
Yeah, but when you say libertarian, that opens, like, a whole can of worms, ranging from some acceptable ideas to some of the worst ideas in the history of all of mankind. And I'm not even talking about the child stuff, just for the weird internet stuff. Just in terms of like, fuck me. I hate the conservatives so much. I'm sorry.
Some guys.
Here, like, the question, like, what has Elon Musk said? Give me, like, one policy that Elon Musk supports that is not, like, directly in line with his interests that you think is, like, beneficial for America. Like, what has Elon said about anything that's like, oh, this would be a good American thing to do?
Something that's good for America, but not. Like, you can look at the social issues. Like, I think he's pro IVF. Now, he uses a lot of, he impregnates a lot of women, so maybe that isn't his interest, but that's sort of a value thing. I guess anyone's
pro IVF. Okay, I'm aiming. Give me something that, like, is more impactful than a footnote on, like, one page of a sociology book for American history. An impactful policy. You mentioned housing, for instance. I haven't heard Elon say anything. Housing, I think, is a huge issue in the United States. Okay, we have all these nukes laying around and all of these suburbs. Okay, in San Francisco. Why haven't we matched these up yet? Okay, we need to get rid of all these single family homes. We need to fucking densify our housing. I've never heard Elon talk about anything related to housing or public transit or, like, social, like, spending. If anything, all I've heard him say is, I'm going to cut $2 trillion off the budget, when our discretionary budget is, like, less than $2 trillion. It's like $1.7 trillion. How are you cutting this? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I'm sure he's probably said something. I'm sure he's replied to some tweet where someone said something about housing, and he said interesting. And, when I see him do that, it's usually in the pro freedom direction. There is a consistent kind of tilt to it. No, you're right. I think his views on Russia and Ukraine, for example, we might not agree with it, but I don't see how it's directly tied to his interests. He basically thinks that Ukraine should be negotiating and the war should be over. I don't know where his interests lie. With China, some people say he has interest there. I don't know if he's doing much with Russia. So there's at least one. You don't have to agree with it, but
I would have to see. I haven't seen him speak too much on the Ukraine-Russia stuff, so it would be hard to say. At this point, I think that that's an okay statement to make. I think this was like a Kremlin spread talking point that a bunch of people got.
They said that stuff all the time.
Oh yeah, then he should fucking off himself, because it's an insanely crazy position to have, that the United States of America, okay, that was one of the, like, stalwarts defenders of European peace and freedom and prosperity, okay, for, like, the past, at least since 91, is now just ceding its position and saying, like, oh, well, if Russia wants to invade countries, then fucking go for it, LOL. That's crazy to me, in my opinion, but there reasonable minds could maybe disagree on that, but I don't know if Elon is even smart enough to have a concept of what's going on in Russia or Ukraine. I'd be curious to listen to him talk at length about it. Like, can he talk about Ukraine, Russia for more than 5 minutes without mentioning Victoria Nuland, or that 2014 was a CIA-backed coup, or that Azov was all Nazis and all the Ukrainian military, or that there were Ukrainian biolabs with viruses targeting Russian soldiers?
Yeah, I know these right-wing talking points, Azov and Nazis and all of that. Nuland, I haven't seen him mention that. It's basically the position, which I don't think is actually crazy, especially at this point, since we're not actually giving Ukraine all that it needs to push Russia back. It's basically a negotiated solution. He wants Ukraine to surrender territory. He's actually been saying this for years. It's not crazy. It's not conspiratorial, whatever. But what you asked for originally was something that is not directly tied to his interest. That's at least one thing.
Maybe, yeah.
And the question of his interest, it's like, some people's interests are convergent with those of society and some are not. So like these longshoremen union, which Biden took the side of and Trump rhetorically has taken the side of too. Basically, their idea is that they need to save their jobs. Therefore, we have to keep having the worst ports in the world. They basically don't want automation, right? And that's good for the union. That's terrible for society. So like that's a case or like this is everyone's acting in their interest, but this is a bad case of someone acting in their interest.
Well, I would say we have to be very careful. Okay. Mr. Poli-Sci, if we're talking about bad case, like it's always good for somebody, bad for somebody else, right? So again, for unions, right? Unions are only there to negotiate on behalf of their employees. But if on the other side, if it's like a public union, for instance, usually they're negotiating against the government, which is arguably the people. But I don't know if I would make the blanket statement of like it's good or it's bad, right? To be fair, but
in this case, for society,
sure. I mean, I would say arguably largely there are things that we probably like. For instance, like the is it the AFL-CIO? What's the name of the largest union fucking conglomerate?
That's the AFL-CIO.
Yeah. Like when I lived in California, I don't know if this is still the case, but I think it was in Southern California, there's like the largest solar energy plant ever. And like the cost of energy, it would have been like so absurdly cheap, but they couldn't turn it on for years, and they might still not be able to because the AFL-CIO was basically arguing against it because it was going to hurt a lot of the fossil fuel jobs that they represented. Which is good for those workers, but arguably bad for society. But yeah,
right. And so that's that's one kind of interest group.
But Trump is the king of like good for some people and bad for all of society, though, right? Like that's what tariffs are all about. Is like good for very, very few people, and then literally fucking assassinating everybody else in America for it.
Yeah. The tariffs thing is going to be one of those issues where how far he goes is going to determine, the contours of the policy. Now, tariffs, my friend Brian Kaplan, economist, pointed this out to me recently. It's actually a small portion of American economy is international trade. So since America is so big, it's not going to have that large of effect, although the effect is going to be pretty bad, depending on how. I mean, if you have 100% tariffs, that's one thing. If you have, 10% on whatever 5% of the trade that is international, he tells me that that's not necessarily going to be a big deal.
Wait, what? How do we arrive at that point?
Well, because so much of like America, most trade is not internationals, right? So a tariff, if I trade California to Chicago, that's not going to be affected by tariffs at all. So you could imagine like a tax that's going to raise, 5% sales tax on everything versus something that's on, 5 or 10% of the economy or whatever international trade. I think
it really depends on, I guess, how granular you want to get measuring that. If I ship something from California to Arkansas, I don't have to pay a tariff on that. But if that's a product that is only made in California because they imported the materials from another place and that did have a tariff associated with it, then now I am paying a tariff essentially on it, right? It's going to be passed on to me down the line, right? Through my supply chain.
Yeah, I mean, so the ultimate effects here are, I mean, but it does depend the number of like the aggregate amount of trade. It's going to be something is obviously going to be influenced, but the question is how much of that trade is subject to the tariffs. But I agree with you. That tariffs are bad. This is one kind of thing where Trump, it's not even like his interest. It's just like his kind of instinct that like foreigners are bad and trading with foreigners is a kind of zero-sum thing. So you're right. I mean, the question is like which party has like more of these things that either somebody believes in because of some interest group, some kind of interest, or because of some defective ideology or way of viewing the world. And you want fewer of those policies, obviously, and more of the other kind.
Well, I think the issue is that I feel like the right not only has a defective ideology because are you familiar with the term like autarky?
Of course.
Yeah, it feels like that's what Trump thinks America should be. Like, that's a good thing. That, like, we need to be digging iron out of the ground and then smelting the ore ourselves and then making the widgets ourselves and then building the circuit boards. Like, and that's a good thing. And that all international trade is bad. Like, anytime, like if you're running a trade deficit, it means you're losing to the other countries or whatever. So I think that, like, I think the theory is bad. But then I think the empirical everything is bad, too. I think the biggest issue with conservatives is they have no accountability for anything they say or do, right? Notice how earlier, why do we know who Fauci is? You know why we know who Fauci is. It's because Donald Trump was not responsible for anything that came out of the executive branch. It was always the people underneath him. It was Fauci, it was Comey, it was anybody else besides him, right? When it's Donald Trump's executive department, it's all the cabinet members and the people underneath him that get blamed. But when it's Biden, And now it's Biden's DOJ. Now it's Biden's problem. Now Biden's the one doing it. How is it that the Republicans can escape accountability in every single thing? Donald Trump is complaining so much about our trade with fucking Canada and Mexico. Hello? He just renegotiated NAFTA into a new fucking agreement with Canada and Mexico. How does he escape the blame from? He's like throwing his own trade deal under the bus, and nobody even thinks to question him on it.
The funniest thing of this was, by the way, you think Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, I assume?
Well, no, I think that Donald Trump killed him because Jeffrey Epstein died in a federal prison when Donald Trump was the president, and he's the one that was on TV saying he probably wouldn't release it because I'm innocent. Like, notice how nobody connects these dots, right?
Yeah, I was just about to bring that up. I love that. That was my favorite thing of Trump. He kills himself while he's in prison. Trump is the president, and he tweets out something strange going on here, like...
in a federal prison. It's your DOJ, it's your FBI, it's your federal bureau of prisons. Yeah, Jesus.
I love it.
You know, if he would have died under Biden, it would have 100% been Biden killed him. Like Biden literally personally ordered the hit.
Somebody brought up like a week before the election or so. Did you see the story? It got lost in the news where there was like a tape of, I didn't even read it because there was so much going on with the election. But basically, Epstein was saying like him and Trump were best buddies.
Best friend,
brought up, imagine if Kamala or Biden, that would be the
I said
end
all of this.
campaign.
Yes, I have a whole thing where if you really wanted to put together conspiracies, because I'm not a conspiracy-driven person, but if you really wanted to put together conspiracies and you were a true, like, I'm a conspiratorial guy, there are so many more that fit Donald Trump so much better. Like the BLM riots to undermine the left, like all happened under Donald Trump's presidency, like the Fedsurrection on January 6th, like all of these embedded agents were happening under, not only were they happening under Donald Trump, they were happening under Chris Wray, who was Donald Trump's hand-picked FBI head who replaced Comey, right? Like there are so many more conspiracies that fit so much better, but they're just like their brain shuts off immediately. Can you imagine? They hang their hat on Biden saying publicly that we would pull the funding from Ukraine if Shokin didn't get fired because of all of these international, basically, agreement, loan guarantees and everything for them to clean up. But that's like a big conspiracy. But a 47-minute phone call with Giuliani talking to Zelensky's aide about how they need to publicly announce an investigation into Hunter Biden with absolutely no foundation whatsoever. And the whole guy that the Burisma stuff was built on just recently finally pled guilty to lying about being the instigator for all of it. Like, bro. Sorry, go ahead. How do you support? What is the equivalence on the left? Give me your worst. What is? I can't. Like, is it trans athletes? What is the thing that drives you on the left? You're like, man, these people are crazier than the right.
You know, yeah, I wrote about this. I mean, you're right. There is no equivalent. There are bad things about the left that you can say.
I agree.
I wrote an article called left-wing beliefs are not conspiracy theories. So what they will say sometimes is that, like, oh, you believe in structural racism, you believe men can become pregnant and so forth. And these are ideological ideas. They're ways of seeing the world.
Some way of seeing it,
think are false. You might think they're false, but like my favorite one that I bring up is when the Paul Pelosi thing. Right?
Oh God.
The guy gets attacked. And then and the New York Times put together this great graphic, which shows like the kinds of people who were questioning it and were implying that he was hanging out with a gay prostitute. But it's like Tucker Carlson, Ted Cruz. It's not like just Alex Jones or whatever.
Whenever I go on Peers and I'm saying like, hey, Donald Trump said this, DeSantis says this, Elon Musk says this, they're like, okay, well, what about this? I think 2-year-olds should be trans. And it's like, Martha Johnson on Twitter, 7 followers, 18 likes on her tweets. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, you're supposed to be arguing for the other side. Go ahead.
I agree. I argue with these people more than you do. I mean,
but you support them. How can you think this is a better vision for the United States? How do you think these people who are totally untethered from reality, how is it the better party?
I think that the ideology of, look, if I'm voting for a local politician, for example, in Texas, I think that probably the Republican is going to believe in more conspiracy theories. But I think he's going to get like the big things about the economy and crime and other issues. I think he's going to get them right. I mean, there can be this kind of, you can be crazy and you can just accidentally sometimes believe in the right things. It's not aesthetically pleasing. Like, I wish I was part of a movement, or my side of the political aisle was like full of reasonable people I could talk to and try to influence.
Okay. When you say that you think he'll get it right economically, what you're saying is we have to ignore every single thing he said We have to ignore his economic track record, and then we have to hope that he's going to pull.
We don't have to ignore his economic track record. I mean, I've just told you that Republicans have been doing pretty well economically. The states have been growing, so I would look at that, and then they would say, well, Jeff Epstein was,
for the president, what is Donald Trump's economic track record? It was not amazing. He just massively deficit spent. He did a tax cut bill, which is government stimulus, and then he just like did that. And then COVID came and he had zero ability to manage a crisis in any way, size, shape, or form. How is this like the leader that, okay, well, I think economically, and also the retaliatory tariffs, everything, we had to bail out like soybean farmers and steel manufacturers and like all this other shit. Like, I don't think Trump's economic track record while in office was good at all. I mean, the stock markets and GDP went up, which Republicans don't care about when it's a Democratic president, but for some reason when it's a Republican one, they all of a sudden, they very much care about it.
Yeah. Well, presidents is a small sample size, right? There's cycles in the economy. There's a lot different things going on. I think that you take what we know from the rest of the world, and I think you apply it to the positions of the different parties, and then you make a decision. I think that lower taxes, less spending. I think entitlements are out of control. I think again, labor unions are bad. I think that basically that the federal bureaucracy does too much as environmental laws and so forth. And in general, Republicans are better than Democrats on these things. Now, Trump was not my ideal candidate, but
I don't think. What are they better on any of those things? On any of the things, like we can go through one at one. So lower taxes. I don't think it's fair to say lower taxes are good when it's not paired with spending cuts, because you're just effectively you're literally a Keynesian economist, the worst of the worst. You're just like deficit spending.
Republicans are also generally better on spending, so they do want to cut spending. They don't do it, and they're terrible on it. But when the parties are negotiating, Paul Ryan did work out with Obama, and it was the Paul Ryan era, Boehner and these people when Republicans were more a serious party, they did get a reduction. And
no. Negotiating to try to kill whatever the Democrat in office is doing, when McConnell says we're going to make the guy a one-term president, does not count as Republican spending when they're negotiating as a Democrat. Republican spending is Bush doing the Iraq war and spending $1 trillion in Afghanistan. Republican spending is Donald Trump doing a massive tax cut where the majority of the interest that we're paying out on the debt, a lot of it has to do with the massive deficit that he ran while in office. I don't think it's fair to say, well, they're really good on spending when they're negotiating against Democrats and they're in office and they're trying to defund every possible thing ever. I don't think that's a fair statement to make.
Well, I mean, look, that is, I mean, it is a position they took. They did end up with a sequesters. Discretionary spending did go down. Trump, even when they were doing the stimulus at the end of the Trump presidency during COVID, Trump was pretty bad, but the Republicans in Congress still wanted to spend less money than the Democrats. So maybe that wasn't even the right. Maybe in that situation, maybe you want the stimulus. I'm not.
I mean, we've only had a budget deficit. When was our budget surplus? In the last 30 years. It was only under Clinton.
Yeah.
And then notice how
Clinton turned to the right because he got beaten in 1994 really, really bad, and there was a general trend to the country to go to the right on these things. So a lot of Clinton's pressure was coming from the right. But I'm sort of a Clinton fan. I mean, I'm not gonna. I think the Clinton era Democratic Party was better than today.
When was the last? I don't think Republicans love to spend, and they say, and I don't know why you need to not do this. You can't give them credit for when a Republican president is in office. Where are the budget cuts? They don't happen. Yeah. They're not happening.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump had, this is the thing that irritates me the most too, okay, is that Democrats have to come in and we have to clean up the worst mess in the world, okay? And Obama came in on the heel of 2007, 2008, which annihilated the world economy for a year at least, okay? And then Biden has to come in under the horrendous COVID everything that was going on, regardless if you think Trump mismanaged it or not, right? Donald Trump came in after the economy was flourishing in the last half of Obama's presidency, since 2013 onwards at least. And then Trump comes in, and if you were ever going to have a budget surplus, if you were ever going to cut spending, this would have been the time to do it. Interest rates have been low, economy was booming, the world had recovered, he comes in, unemployment is low, everything's fine, but he doesn't do it, he still deficit spends. If we wouldn't expect him to be fiscally conservative or responsible in that environment, why would we ever expect him to be responsible in this environment? Like, as much as Republicans make fun of the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and it was called that, I think, just because it paired spending with budget cuts, I do think Trump will pass any deficit neutral legislation at all in the next 4 years.
No, I don't think so. Look, I mean, the spending thing is difficult. There was just the thing that's most important for spending is entitlements. Social Security and Medicare are going to eat the budget. there was just a vote in Congress to raise the retirement age to 70, which I think is probably a reasonable thing to do. Three senators voted for it. They were all Republicans. They were Rand Paul and a woman from Wyoming, and I think Mike Lee. Right. So this is where we are on spending to cut spending on the big stuff, the welfare for old people. You have maybe 3 Republicans in the Senate and 0 Democrats who are willing to do it.
But that's never changing because this is your strongest voter base, right? Social Security and Medicare are not going anywhere. That's just not happening, right?
Look, there have been there's a Romina Bocchia who's at a Cato Institute, talks about how this has been done historically. The way they do it is, and maybe this can still happen, you basically have a commission. The commission gets together and then the Congress just basically signs off. They all agree on what the commission is. Partisanship makes that very hard because everyone's going to want to play, they're going to use it as a political football. But yeah, you have to sort of outsource it away from the political process and then just sort of pass it with everyone sort of getting their hands dirty at the same time. It's harder. It's getting harder and harder. I think Republicans are at least have some people in their coalition who are taking this seriously. Democrats do not. But
hold on. You mentioned 3 people, one of which is a joke voter. Okay, Rand Paul. Listen, I was a huge Ron Paul fan. I love him. Okay, but that guy voted fucking no on everything. Okay, and Rand Paul I'm guessing he's probably similar. Okay, I was a Ron Paul guy.
He voted yes on raising the retirement age, so that's a yes.
Or that when I say, I mean like votes on anything having to like reduce the size of government, right? If you want to disrupt Social Security, why not just raise the Social Security tax a little bit? Like raise the cap on what's taxed. That might help a bit. No.
I mean, it would basically become a, I mean, it would raise taxes. I don't think I think we're taxed enough. I mean, I think that government basically, I think that old people have, more money than any other group. They're financially better off than any other age group. And I think I think that having an effective tax rate of 50% is not good for growth. I don't think that's just, and I think that's too high. So
sure, I don't think we have an effective tax rate of 50% almost anywhere. And this is from a guy who made a lot of money in California.
If you live in California, and if you raise the Social Security, if you kept Social Security beyond the, whatever the cap is, 135,000, yeah, you get up to 50%. You get up to more than 50%.
Also, I think that the claim that old people are the wealthiest, I mean, that's always going to be true, right? Wealth is largely a function of age, right? So older people are always going to...
We don't have to have a welfare state for.
Well, sure, but I also think you run into issues of like what does it mean when you're wealthy as an old person, right? A lot of that wealth could be tied up in a home or something else that's relatively illiquid. So unless you're going to reverse mortgage your shit or there are other exotic financial products.
I mean, what if you're young? I mean, you're young and they're taking out that 13% out of your paycheck. That's also a problem too. You might not be able to move into your home. So if we're on a sort of broader level of like how we organize society, I think people should have more resources in the time of their life when they're gonna form families and have kids. If you're going to think about, sort of like when we want them to be wealthy, I think that young people basically create the next generation. And if they have an affordability problem, it's a bigger deal than if old people do.
Sure, I agree. What are the most important things to help to help young people, though? It's generally wealth transfers, right? In the form of subsidized student loans so that they can get an education, which, by the way, Donald Trump wants to cut the entire Department of Education, but...
Well, that's complicated because it's a rat race, right? Once you basically start subsidizing education, basically people get educated, and then you're keeping up with other people. So you're taking people out of the labor force. You're forcing them to sort of get this credential just because everyone else has that credential.
Well, hold on. You're forcing them to have the credential because the world is becoming increasingly sophisticated, and a higher level of specialization is demanded for your labor, right? If we wanted to, we could obliterate all of.
You're getting that in college. No, I don't think if you think that someone going and getting a sociology, nothing against sociology. I'm not one of those people who thinks like nobody should study anything. But like I taught political science. I mean, the idea that they were getting specialized knowledge from me that was going to help them in the labor market, I think that's clearly not true. They were there to get a credential.
There's one argument that I'm favorable here to as a race realist. There's one argument that I am favorable to that says that college is worthless. It's not that one, though. The only argument that I'm slightly warm to, and I have to do way more reading to have a stronger opinion on it, is the idea that education confers financial advantages because it basically just serves as an IQ filter, meaning that people that are smart enough to get high-paying jobs just end up going to college because they're smart enough to go to college and then pass it and then get a job afterwards. However, the big push against that, as a big free market capitalist guy, is do you do college sports at all or pro sports at all?
You mean follow? Yeah, I've followed. I don't have time these days. But
I think there are big debates over, or there used to be. Man, sports is not my area. The NBA can draft people right out of high school, can't they?
I think they changed that rule. They made it a year. They made you.
Okay, maybe there's a year.
They did change it at some point.
For the NFL, I'm pretty sure you're specifically not allowed to, because the college football they want that college football. They want those people. They don't want you to take them out of high school, right? But they would otherwise if they could, right? Well, what does this tell me? This tells me that it might be that a 19 or 20-year-old could play in the NFL. They might be good enough to do it, but like there are structural things that are preventing them from doing so. If it was the case that college is just a huge waste of time, why would any, like, I think we still live in a capitalist environment. We still live in a competitive environment where all these companies are like, hey, college, we're going right to high school. We're going to recruit these right out of high school. So we know college is a waste of time. We know it's selling. We're going to get the best and brightest minds at age 18, 19 instead of having them waste 4 years. Why hasn't that happened yet if college is just a waste of time?
It's actually a very good question. There are like these, there are these norms and there are these kind of sort of societal, there is kind of like an equilibrium right now where everyone goes to college. If you don't go to college and you just submit your SAT score to IBM or whatever company is hiring, it does look a little weird. Now, like some people who are a little bit more startup-y in their ethic, like a lot of these Silicon Valley types and a lot of these companies, like Google, I mean, I think they used to just make you solve like puzzles and stuff. So like in coding and like some of the more dynamic aspects of the economy, they do something that's a lot more similar.
Sure. But if I were to go look at Google or anybody that does like the very technical interviews or these people that waste their time, doing leak code shit or whatever, right? If I were to go and look at these hirees, do you think on the aggregate they tend to be more college educated or less college educated than even the ordinary college educated population? Like my guess is there's probably not a whole bunch of college dropout or only high school educated, like high level Amazon or Google programmers. My guess is most of them probably went through school.
Yeah, I mean, it is probably a shortcoming of the market. I mean, there are I wrote an entire book on this civil rights law, which actually complicates this a little bit. If you give IQ tests, that's legally sort of suspect because groups do differently on the IQ test. So they'll come and say, prove that you're not discriminating. Now, college, if you use a bachelor's degree, it's actually the same problem in theory because some groups graduate college at much higher rates. Hispanics actually graduate even less than blacks. So you could go to a disparate impact case there, but the bureaucrats don't do that. They consider it a fine as a credential. While IQ tests do bring problems. So there are like legal barriers in addition to sort of societal norms, but like
I don't think a norm is going to overpower like that much financial incentive, right? Like you're talking about a huge advantage because when people are recruiting out of college, bro, it is criminal. No offense to any of my friends, okay, but it is criminal how much some of these fucking 22-year-old loser people I know that are getting these ridiculous jobs at Amazon, like first year total compensation over $250,000. And I'm like, listen, you're a smart guy, but what the bro? If you could grab these kids right out of high school instead of having to compete after they graduate from their 4-year university or whatever, I think there would be a massive financial incentive to do so. And I think you see people mining the high schools for like really bright talent immediately. I don't think there'd be any cultural norm that would prevent Amazon or Google or Apple from just like, doing high school senior career drives or whatever.
What's your explanation then?
I think college is probably important. There's probably a bunch of soft skills, and then obviously we both agree on this, right? If you're doing engineering or some like very specific work, you probably absolutely need the hard skills of whatever you're picking up in a college environment. Nobody's learning, like all of the math and everything on their own time, to get into these jobs. So I think college probably is helpful to a large extent because of like the variety of skills that you pick up, and I think there's probably some degree of like college is a decent preparer for the real world, and that it's a good balance of can you manage your time, can you manage assignments, can you report to a boss, and that like somebody that's graduated from a college environment is probably a little bit better suited for like white collar or middle class work than somebody who's not able to.
Yeah, and so it's a question also whether that's a skill that they teach you in college or it's just a signal that you could do that, because you can grab an 18-year-old with really high IQ. 18-year-olds are often idiots, right? Mm-hmm. As far as personal responsibility. If the guy went to college, he graduated in 4 years, he got A's. That's at least something. So yeah, it's a signal of something. Maybe he didn't learn anything, but he just showed you he was the kind of person who could succeed at a real job.
Sure, but then I mean, at the very least, then if we were to go that road, and I'm warmer to this road, we would at least have to be able to suggest something in the alternative rather than just like eliminating college, because now we have no idea how that filter works, because it sure as fuck isn't 6-week coding boot camps, and it's not getting your certs or whatever. Like it doesn't seem like society has figured out so far like a more effective filter. And when I say society, I mean really like worldwide society too, right? We complain about the H-1B stuff, but people aren't going into the slums of New Delhi trying to find like gifted and talented 17-year-old coders, okay, Slumdog Millionaire. I think they're probably just going to the top universities in India and like picking out the talent there and being like, these are the guys that I want working for me or whatever, you know?
Yeah, so the question of the norm thing is actually interesting. So China, some people might be surprised to learn, actually has a very, very low rate of college graduation. You think of China as a very smart country, a very
No, I don't think so.
What? It's not a smart country?
No, I wouldn't think that. I understand why people would think that, because when people think China, they think like Shanghai or something. But like my understanding is the majority of China is probably still like rural-ish people, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
China is, it's still not that rich.
I understand what you're saying, though. A lot of people think that, yeah.
As far as like growth, where it came from, it was below sub-Saharan Africa only 30 or 40 years ago. And then if you look at like stuff like patents per capita, some of the people say China, you don't trust the scientific stuff, but I think most measures will say China is not like a typical country for it. It's definitely more scientifically advanced than Mexico, which is maybe equal in wealth. And China actually, while it's having all this growth, has a pretty low college graduation rate, right?
Sure.
And so somehow it was working. Somehow they were having all this success in science and tech without people going to college. That makes me think it's probably just like norms. I mean, it's just like you have this system where like everyone just does something, and people can be irrational. Maybe you're more, maybe you're I'm a market guy who trusts market forces, but maybe this is one case where maybe you're sort of more confident in those forces than I am.
Hold on. Okay. Number one. Okay. And you're the fucking Trump guy here. Okay. So you should know this. Okay. Number one. Yes, China has been able to make a lot of scientific advancement. A lot of it comes off of just stealing U.S. patents, though. Okay. I would have to do more focused research into this, but like the things that I've heard colloquially, that like if you want to do business in China, for instance, you have to have an office in China, and if you have anything in China, they will steal your shit, and it's going to happen. There's literally fucking
China, any measure. There are measures of like Nature Index, like new scientific papers that gets highly cited across the world, and like you can make like disputes. Oh, China, some of it is like BS. There's a lot of fraudulent research, but there's no measure you could use, anything that's like objective, that will not show you that China is like a technological powerhouse.
No, sure. Yeah, I agree. But I'm saying that one, a lot of that is coming from stealing patents from other people. So like U.S. Okay.
They may steal patents, but like as original stuff that they're actually doing.
Sure.
I mean, I think there's probably no IP law in a lot of third world countries. A lot of third world countries probably would steal your IP if they could and get away with it. I mean, it's just they don't.
Sure. But that's one thing. Number two is China's a lot of people to draw from. Right. So they might be able to afford having what is China's is it like 5 times the U.S.? What is China's population now? They have a
1.2 or
1.4 billion. Yeah, they have a lot of people that they can draw from as well. So even if as a percentage they have less educated people, as an absolute value, they might have a lot more. And scientific progress is, I mean, it doesn't matter if your per capita is higher. Scientific progress is looking just for an absolute amount of research done towards a particular thing, right? And then number 3, when we say culturally, who values education? I mean, in the United States, don't we have for the first time like white people who are like, okay, hold on, guys, I am feeling excluded and racially, fucked over because these Chinese people are actually way overrepresented at our colleges. I need some fucking affirmative action. Fuck these people. They're ruining our shit. I feel like Chinese people value education quite a bit. I feel like it's evident in any like major U.S. university, though.
Right. They value, I mean, like education can be a lot of things, right? Does it have to take the form of going to a college? Like some people like buy their kids all kinds of like, they take their kids to math camp and they have their like little toys that they care about education, and some people take their kids to monster truck rallies. I don't think it's necessarily like college when you're 18 to 22 that is a factor. Like I think if you abolished like, I don't know, the bottom 50% of college, like if you undergrad education, like obviously colleges are doing important things in scientific research, even in social sciences are doing at least interesting things. I think like if like the bottom 50% of undergrads were no longer being undergrads, like we just said, if you're not in the top 50% of people going to college now, you can't go to college. Like would our workforce like become like less competent? Like
I think it would become substantially less productive for sure.
Yeah. I don't think so actually.
What I feel, where can I?
Maybe in the short run, maybe because there would be some like we talked about this sort of signaling thing, this filtering thing, where like, but they would figure something out. Someone would figure something out where they would be able to test you to see if you're conscientious, or maybe high school would become more important, and like high schools would get more serious or whatever. I think in a few years people would basically figure it out. There's too much. It's just like 4 years of your life to just know look, to know to turn your assignments in and to show up on time. Like, why can't a company pay you below minimum wage, like $2 an hour? Instead of you paying $60 an hour, they could pay you $2 an hour, and you could just learn. Like, they could just babysit you for 3 years if that's what you need, and then have an evaluation and say, okay, now you're ready for a big boy job. Like, why can't that be the system rather than you pay $60,000 a year to a university?
I mean, it might just be that being in an environment with other people that are learning, and I'm sympathetic towards the idea that something should replace education, because there's that quote, like, if you pull somebody from the dark ages and throw them into modern society, the only thing they would recognize is the schooling, basically. Like, I'm sympathetic towards some type of reevaluation there, but like, if there was something huge to be done, did your brain just thumbs up me?
I accidentally.
Okay, sorry. If there was a way to iterate on this, I haven't seen anybody do it yet, and I think that's like worth kind of like looking at, like, okay, well, what are these replacements to education that some other people have figured out? Because I think that's the type of revolution that if somebody figured it out, that would spread like wild. You wouldn't even need a government policy; it would instantaneously take over.
Maybe it's what I just said. Maybe it's the minimum wage law. Maybe it would be worth training these people for $4 an hour. It wouldn't be worth training them for $15 an hour, or whatever the federal
$7.25 an hour. Isn't that what the federal minimum wage is still?
Yeah, I mean, maybe if you're just babysitting, maybe like $1 an hour, it would be like a fair wage, right? So you have like this massive subsidy going to into education, and then you have like the minimum wage, sometimes unions and other things that make it hard to get a job. Sometimes arbitrary credentials, like government will just require certain credentials for things, and so you got these other things that are sort of messing with the system. That's making it harder to arrive at something new. You have all this money pumped into other things, a few things being done to like stop another system from forming, and you end up with sort of what we have. And the answer to that would be like, if you're right, if it's like, it can't be right. Like, it's not like being a lawyer. 4 years in college, 3 years in law school, 7 years. That's a big chunk of your life. Like, some countries, they just do it as like an undergrad degree, right? Why are we wasting, like, to take away 3 years of people's lives is a big freaking deal. And like, it's ridiculous. Like, we don't think more carefully about what we're doing here.
Well, I mean, I think it's ridiculous to assume that nobody's thought about what we're doing here. I think that there are people that, like, for instance, if you're in California, I think you just have to do like 120 days of law office shit. I have to go look it up, but you can take the bar there without.
There are some states that have this.
Yeah, but it's not like there's a whole bunch of people that are exploring these options, right? Like, if you were to tell me, for instance, it seems a few years ago, I think after COVID, somebody was like, bro, did you know that instead of trying to like sneak into the US and be an illegal immigrant, just like go into the US and then find like a border guard and say, hey, I'm claiming asylum. Did you know you can get into the US for free? That's like, wait, really? People figured that out, and now we have like, it is the problem with immigration right now, is our asylum system, right? Clearly that is an effective way to gain access to this country and then to be released, because there's a backlog of cases to be heard. So that, like, it makes sense to me if somebody's like, oh, look, like, there was a huge vulnerability here. Yeah, I see that. People are exploiting the fuck out of it. But if there was a super easy way to acquire training for on-the-job stuff, how has nobody figured this out yet anywhere around the world? I don't think anybody's figured this out. And do I trust Donald?
Why isn't the minimum wage? It's not worth it. It costs too much to train them. They don't want to bother. The subsidies.
I don't even know if I believe that it costs too much to train them. I feel like,
because a lot of them are not going to end up working. A lot of them, they might train, and they might, and it's like, yeah, I mean, if you train them, how do you know they don't leave, right? You could have a contract that says, you can't have like indentured servitude contracts. I'm sure that that wouldn't be enforced by the courts. So there's probably all kinds of things like that make it maybe, because half of people start college don't even finish. So if you pay them
sure,
anything,
but now it feels like what we're doing. Now I feel like it's a libertarian argument where it feels like you're just recreating school. Like, I could see a company where it's like, okay, well, we're hiring people at $2 an hour, so we need like a teaching division for our company. And eventually, like, there's 5 companies on the same block who are like, okay, well, this is done. We all have individual teaching divisions now. We've had to hire teachers for it. What if all of us pool our resources and we make like one other company that trains people to come? And I feel like you're just going to basically recreate college at that point.
Maybe, but it would be like, I think it would be better. I mean, I think it would be a lot less like women's studies and a lot more practical skills, and maybe that would be what the market would settle on. I'm not against that.
I don't know. For even people that have women's studies degrees are making more money than people who are just high school grads. Number one. Number two, I think it would be a tragedy and a travesty if the U.S.'s educational facilities became solely geared towards employment training. I think that things like the arts, liberal arts especially, you're a poli-sci guy. You said in academia, I don't know if that meant PhD or master's or whatever, but like these are good things to have in society, right? They're important, right? I think it's good to have people.
I think they're important for like people. It's important for these things to exist. I think it's important for like somebody to be thinking seriously about anthropology and philosophy and political science and so forth. How much benefit do we have for like the bottom 50% of students who are just there? I mean, I've taught them I taught at UCLA for a while. They're just there to, and UCLA is a decent school. I mean, it's not like the bottom 50% of schools or anything. It's somewhat selective. And so like, they just don't care. I mean, they're just there. A lot of them are just there to get the degrees. You know, one or two or three will be really interested in the ideas, will want to talk about them. They're benefiting. But yeah, I mean, probably some people, you know, I think that learning, I think, has value for its own sake. I believe in culture and social science and all that stuff actually mattering, like not just being a kind of a corporate drone or somebody who's just an engineer and, you know, a technical guy who cares about nothing else. Do we need, you know, 70% of kids going to school and then half of them not finishing? Like, I don't think so.
Sure, but I think that we work that out rather than just get rid of all of schooling and destroy one of the most productive workforces in the entire world by doing a unique thing that no other country has ever embarked on before, and then hope that it works out under a guy who clearly just like hates education.
We're talking about degree. We're not talking about anything radical, right? We're talking about.
Well, Donald Trump wants to eliminate the Department of Education, right? That's a pretty radical step.
Department of Education is like a percentage of education spending. I don't think it's that high. At least for K through 12.
Well, hold on. Yeah, I'm sorry. I could be totally making this up. My guess would be over half of, or at least over 30 or 40% of like college spending comes from like loans guaranteed by the Department of Education.
Yeah.
K through 12, maybe not, but Department of Education is like for student loans and stuff for colleges, right?
Well, if that counts, from Department of Education. Yeah, you're right. I guess okay. Yeah. Well, first of all, they're not going to. Okay, like when some Democrats say, universal free college, that's not going to happen either. Cutting Department of Education, especially, and even if they got rid of Department of Education, I think they would still keep the grant. That doesn't necessarily mean that they would get rid of the grants. So we're talking here about policy is sort of calibration. Do we want a government? It's not like we're going to abolish college tomorrow, or we're going to have a system like Germany where everyone goes for free tomorrow. We're going to be a place where we're going to spend a little more on college. We're going to encourage more people to go, or we're going to nudge a few less people to go. I think we're on the side of too much education, too much college. Good reason to vote Republican in the grand scheme of things.
Well, how do we? I guess I'm just not. There are like data points that I would look at, like even the bottom fourth of college grads. Like if we go to the BLS website and you look up people who are holding like certain jobs, like even the shit degrees, the basket weaving degrees, these people are on average making more money than people who just have high school. There might be confounding factors that are explaining it, but I don't know. I feel like it's hard to see evidence of we just have way too much college right now. Like our workforce is so productive. Yeah.
Yeah, there are good studies, and I forget, so I'd have to look them up. I don't want to be held to what they say.
Sure.
But they try to get at these confounding variables where they'll look at like going to a good school versus going to a bad school, and there'll be some cutoff. People with like exact same credentials, but one happened to get into like Ivy League school and somebody didn't, or somebody happened to go to college or somebody didn't. I forget what they find. I don't want to say anything of that, but there are like ways to try to get at it. But just comparing, a women's studies major versus someone who did go to I think there's too much going on there to
Sure, there might be. Yeah, that might be the case. Yeah, huge confounds because the type of person who even get that type of degree is probably in a much better area, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. To return to a point that I brought up earlier, though, the issue that I have even with the conversation we're having right now is I think there's a world where that conversation can happen about what does college and education look like. It's never happening with somebody like Charlie Kirk, who thinks that they're woke universities who are wokeifying the kids and transing the students and everything else, because I don't think this guy has the best interest. One of the issues that I run into a lot with conservatives, it comes up with tariffs, trade policy, with everything else as well, is that they talk about economics, but they're really defending or fighting for some vague notion of culture. And I don't even know what that culture is they're fighting for. And I'm almost getting it from you, but maybe not. I think you are speaking a bit more on the economic side. But like, if somebody wants to fight about culture, we can do that. But that's a fundamentally separate argument than the economic one. And a lot of the cultural arguments get dressed up economically. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think immigration is, I've been pointing that out recently.
Yeah,
Like there are some economists who are skeptical of maybe low skill immigration. There is no serious economist that I've ever found that is skeptical of high skilled immigration into the
sure.
United States. Maybe some activists or something, but not like someone who happens to be an economist. Anyone who's any look at this stuff, right or left. I mean, right, there are right wing economists and left wing economists. Um, and so, yeah, they do have to sort of dress that up as a cultural argument. I saw JD Vance had an interview before the election with Ross Douthat, and they asked him like, well, what kind of economic, policies do you care about? He's like, I think that like he basically said too much trade and too much immigration. And I was just thinking like, those are just two things. Like you didn't just arrive at those like analytically. You arrived at those because those are two things that involve foreigners,
Yeah,
right? You
and
have the two
motivating.
things
Yeah,
that involve foreigners, and there's nothing like in theory that's similar between free trade and immigration. You're just grouping them in your mind because basically there's a cultural concern here,
hmm
and I think that's right. I think that's right. Trying to think like the left. I think that there is like a concern with. Um, yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think it is worse on the right. I won't make a
okay.
false equivalent here.
I do agree that
Um,
like in the left, if instead of Mexico, we had like a Poland to the south of us, and it was a whole bunch of like very racist white people. That's not to say that that's all of Poland. That was mean. But like if we had a country like that, the left might feel a little bit differently about immigration from the
You know,
south. That's
I
possible,
actually did a,
sure.
had a published paper on this where I changed the identity of the migrants. I did a survey. I changed the identity whether they vote Republican or whether they vote Democrat, and
hmm
whether they were white or whether they were non-white.
Sure.
And even when they were white and voted Republican, Democrats were still more pro-immigration. Like you could shift them, but Democrats were still more pro-immigration, even on the immigrants who are most likely to be Republican and the whites who you think that they might not be least sympathetic towards. So yeah, I
Sure.
think there's something sort of there's a kind of right wing chuttery that is just like everything is different. Even if they like me, like I'm gonna be like, this is a based Hispanic guy, like he's awesome because he says MAGA, and then like here's this Hispanic who just like looks exactly like him and his cousin, and I hate that guy just because he like doesn't have citizenship. He crossed over yesterday rather than a couple years ago. There
Yeah.
is this kind of just unthinking chuttery. It used to be uh, distributed somewhat evenly between the parties, and now it's on the Republican side, unfortunately.
Yeah. But I think a lot of that has come from the inability to like grapple honestly with the other side's arguments or anything, which I think is, yeah, it's getting annoying from the like I said this a couple of years ago, and it's unfortunately it is the case now where I've said that like nothing will ever happen again that's not like a conspiracy. Every single event now until MAGA is gone or until we have a civil war and half the country is fucking nukes itself or something. I don't know. Like every single world event, every single domestic event that happens is always going to be a conspiracy from now on. If Donald Trump's inauguration is like an hour late, like it's going to be a conspiracy. I've said this, like one of the worst things that could happen to this country is if Donald Trump, right, this fat old dude who lives off McDonald's and doesn't believe in exercise, if this guy were to die of a heart attack, it would be over, bro. MAGA would 1,000,000,000% know that like Hillary Clinton got the death note and wrote his fucking name in and had him die on stage or something. Like it would be the end of the world.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the conspiracy thing, I think it's always existed. I think that now you have social media, now you have people can build audiences you
Mm-hmm.
couldn't get into the New York Times or CBS or whatever. And then the educational polarization where it's all on one side. So it's like there's not like a Republican elite checking this stuff. Like Democrats, after Trump won the election this time, there were like people online who were like, "Why aren't you demanding a recount?" And basically the Democrats, they either ignored them or they shut them down. They didn't play
Yeah.
footsie with them.
And
They didn't even like
how stupid
dog.
was I that I tweeted out afterwards? Wow, what an unbelievably fucking stupid thing for me to tweet. I was like, well, since Trump won this election, I guess that means that there was no voter fraud, right? And they were like, actually, no. That means there's even stronger evidence that 2020 was voter fraud. I was like, oh my bad, kill me, bro. I guess, yeah.
I love it. Yeah, you guys are too virtuous. I mean, that's what I love to go to conservative audiences and be like, liberals are really, really virtuous. You guys should acknowledge that. It doesn't go over well, but
Yeah, because there's never
I
any
think the
acknowledgement there.
election
Yeah.
thing is a direct comparison. I think there's no question that even that reached them. I did have a tweet that went a little semi-viral, which was basically like, if you really thought the Democrats would not accept the election, and now, they all have everyone from Kamala to Biden to every member of Congress, like rethink like what you got wrong. And, some people were like, oh no, this just proves 2020. Exactly what you said. That was probably the majority response of the people who decided to respond to the tweet. There were more than you might think who said, yeah, I didn't expect this. And maybe this shifted my view a little bit.
Maybe, but then the cult draws them back in because you have to have 100% ideological conformity around every other major issue, so it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
What? There has to be something more, okay? I don't understand how you can. Would you agree that Biden's presidency? I feel like even progressives admitted, like people that are fucking super hate the Democratic establishment, like, okay, Biden did a lot better as a president than anybody thought he could have. Do you think that Biden's presidency was pretty good, or do you think it was a disaster? What is your overall take on that, I guess, over the past 4 years?
I don't think it was a disaster. I mean, I think he was about like an average president. I don't see something that he did, which he didn't deal with sort of, I think, the big issues that you could have dealt with, like housing. There actually are things you could do on federal government. He didn't do them, but he didn't do anything, obviously, on entitlements.
Well, I don't think. I mean, like, how much can you touch? Like what? Like how? I feel like the federal government can't make a meaningful contribution. Or when you say housing, I guess. I'm sorry. Let's back up. What do you mean by that?
There was actually a good Iglesias article on this. Basically, the federal government, the way it works is that if they consider something serious enough, like broadband expansion, is the example he used, they will make it an issue. They will prioritize it by tying it to funding. So there's all these kinds of things that are not federal issues until the government decides this is important enough. And I think housing clearly falls into that category.
I can half buy that. The only issue with housing though is that like extremely limited supply of land that like super fucks your ability to, like, for broadband, you're moving it all together.
There's no shortage. There's no shortage of land. You could build up. Like the problem is you can't build up. And by the way, between San Francisco and Los Angeles, there should be it's empty land. You could drive that route. That San Francisco should be a mega city the size of Tokyo. I mean, it has like all the largest companies in the world. They're all concentrated there.
Yeah.
These should be.
I agree with you. But this goes to what I was saying. That's why I was saying earlier, pair the nukes with the suburbs. Okay, it's insane how. So, I lived in Glendale, Culver City, and then Huntington Beach. I don't know if there's like a regulation in. Do you live near? You said near LA.
Yeah.
Is there like a law that says none of the apartment buildings can be higher than 5 stories? Why is it?
And that's where you can. I'm pretty sure that's right. And that's when you can build apartment buildings, which is but a lot of places you can't.
All that to say that like broadband is basically the federal government saying we want to take this seriously. We're going to give the states a whole bunch of money or earmark money for it. Go build broadband, right? But you're working on like another dimension. You're going underground or above ground. You don't have to like tear apart homes to do it. The zoning thing, I think zoning hits at a very strange. Like you almost have to get anti-democratic. My intuition here is, I don't have data to sort this. My intuition is you almost have to get anti-democratic to fix it, because if you go into a particular area, one, if you upzone, in the short term, it is going to hurt all of your housing owners, right? You would agree with that, right? Property values will go down, right? And then two, in the long term, it's probably more beneficial. But then two, because the main people that are being hurt by things like bad zoning or rent control, are people that are trying to move into the city because they can't afford shit and then they get like completely zoned out of the market. But then two, the people that own the homes versus the people that come in for apartments, the people that own homes are your strongest voters, right? Like, not to knock anything, even for Miami that I live now or LA, I never felt tied to that city. I have an apartment, I move, I don't give a fuck or whatever. But if you like own a house there, well, I'm going to every fucking city council meeting or I'm going to fucking vote. Like, I feel a lot more strongly about the zoning stuff here. So I feel like you run into this paradoxical issue that democracy can't solve for. And I don't know where the federal government can step in and be like, actually, we are going to bulldoze your suburb. Get fucked because the federal government said so. I feel like these are always going to be dealt with at like the municipal or city level or whatever.
It's more the stick than the carrot. What they do is they would go to war for Obama's second administration and Biden, over like trans issues. Like they would basically the underlying threat of all this is that you don't get the federal funding for your schools, right? So that's what you do. It's the funding. It's the funding with conditions. And so the federal government is always sort of shoveling money at localities, and they do stuff like say, okay, make sure you don't have like, we're going to investigate you for civil rights. That's the basis of saying like, oh, you stopped too many black people. We're investigating. The only reason the federal government has a right to do that is because it's tied to the Civil Rights Act, which is tied to federal funding. If a police force or like a city didn't want to take money, they wouldn't have to put up with a lot of this stuff that comes from Washington. So a lot of the stuff from Washington is like that. And so like, it just requires some kind of thinking about where sort of the levers are, what kind of leverage you have. And the federal government has a lot of leverage. That's how it's been able to put its claws into basically everything.
Yeah, so I agree with you on that. However, I would argue there's a whole other, can of worms.
You want to talk about Biden's presidency? I think the invasion of Ukraine. I think
Oh,
that
real quick
they
before I go to
should.
that. Wait, just real quick on the federal government thing. The issue that I have with the stick thing there is that like I feel like the other stuff. I feel like a lot of issues we're made to care about these a lot. We're made to feel like these are really big deals, but they're really not. So they don't hit that hard. Like I don't think illegal immigration is anywhere near as big an issue as people say it is. We only care about it because they say it on the news. I think if I would tell you yesterday that 100 million people illegally immigrated versus 1 million, you have no idea. Most people, a person in Pennsylvania whose main issue is illegal immigration is not voting on that issue because he genuinely cares about it. It's because he's heard about it on the news. I feel like when it comes to like trans integration or black people go to school, like Title IX stuff or whatever, like for sports or whatever, I feel like these are not real issues as much. So the federal government has more room to bully there. But if it came that like signs are going up saying we're demolishing this neighborhood or you guys have to move because of federal government stuff, I think that people would become a lot more aware of that because that is a very real issue. And I think people will care a lot more. And I don't know if the federal government could bully people as much. I would agree that if they could, where they could, I think they should do that. I think it'd be great. But I think another issue you run into there is that like Biden was coming in off of COVID. And I don't know if redoing America's housing sector was like, if that was the time to do it. Maybe under Trump's admin, it would have been good the first time because nothing else was going on. But yeah, but okay, that was on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe sometimes it's this idea that you take power out of the hands of the localities. That's what they do at the state level because that's what they've been trying to do in California. The legislature has actually been more pro YIMBY, and the localities have been fighting. In Colorado, Governor Jared Polis has done some good things at the state level. So often you have to go to a higher level. So it's like the state is going to be more YIMBY than the localities and the federal government too. So yeah, I mean it's whatever. It's something he didn't do. I think it's one of the major issues that he could have done. I agree with you. The illegal immigration. I don't say the border is out of control or anything like that. It's not something that I think is particularly a big deal. The Ukraine thing, I think on the foreign policy stuff, actually, I'm a fan. Maybe we could debate this. I'm a fan of Trump's foreign policy approach.
Okay.
All else, in the aggregate. So the Ukraine thing. There was an interview I heard a while back on the War of the Rocks podcast with one of the top officials of the Biden administration. I don't remember who, but this is consistent with all the news reporting. That basically they never tried to make it off. Like I agree Putin sucks, and I agree it's bad to be into this idea that he's justified or anything like that. But they never tried to just say, look, NATO off the table. Okay, NATO off. They could have just taken NATO off the table, and maybe Putin invades anyway. In which case, he's just a prick, and there's no appeasing. And then you go and you could support Ukraine 100%. But they never even discussed it. They never even considered it.
Why? Why would you?
Well, because you don't want him to invade Ukraine. It's appeasement. But But
didn't we try not to do the everything is like Hitler in World War II? But isn't this not the way to go when dealing with people like this?
I mean, Ukraine is not joining NATO right now. Right now, here we are, 2 years later, 3 years later now, and Ukraine is destroyed, and it's not joining NATO.
Sure, but I mean, other countries did. Finland or whatever joined NATO. I think there was one other country I forgot. But
we appease all the time. I mean, North Korea has at one point I think they almost killed the South Korean president. They sent a hit squad. They went to the Blue House. This was decades and decades ago. But North Korea has killed American soldiers and has captured American ships, and we appease them because they're nuts and they have nuclear weapons, and it's something we can just live with. Now, if you could have avoided the Ukraine war, it's not.
Hold on, wait. When was the last time North Korea captured American ships?
A long time ago. I'm talking decades. It was decades ago.
Yeah, if this were to happen today, I think North Korea would be wiped off the map. There's no way that North Korea would get away with, and I think North Korea knows this, which is why because they operate within a boundary where they know.
You've got to have some limit, right? You can't be completely appeasing. So yeah, if North Korea starts slaughtering American soldiers or starts taking them hostage,
or even South Koreans, right? But
okay, but letting your soldiers get killed or letting your soldiers get captured is different from saying we're not gonna include Ukraine in NATO. I think morally Ukraine has every right to want to be in NATO. I think morally Russia does not have a right to tell Ukraine what to do. But it's just a hard reality that if they were willing to go to war over it and kill all these people and destroy Ukraine, it's something we should have considered.
Would you say the same if they wanted to invade Poland?
No, because then at that point we have the NATO guarantee. We make the guarantee.
Wait, but what changes there?
Because we have the guarantee. They're in NATO already, right? You can't just.
Well, but wouldn't there still be the same threat of World War III or nuclear annihilation, or isn't that the hard reality?
No, because you have to because Poland, there's no difference between Poland and Germany at that point. They want to take Poland, they'll take Germany. Germany is also a NATO. NATO versus not a NATO is a very big division. And so like I think it was probably like Lithuania and like, Estonia are part of NATO. It's like
Yeah, all three
those
Baltic.
countries. What's that?
Yeah, all three: Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia. Yeah.
Yeah. And like those countries it's not if they weren't in NATO today, it wouldn't be like it would be a vital national interest for them to be in NATO. But the fact that they are means that like you can't let them be taken over.
Well,
by
it
Russia.
sounds to me like it would be a vital national interest, right? Because it sounds like, because what you're telling me, it sounds like all the because like this argument feels too circular for me, too Mearsheimer-ish for me, where it's like, well, Ukraine is not in NATO, and it's like, okay, and that makes them okay to invade. Well, it sounds like they want to be in NATO. Okay, well, we're going to invade them because they might join NATO. Okay, well, like, why would they want to join NATO? Well, because if they're not in NATO, they could be invaded. Okay, well, what if we don't join NATO? Well, then we're going to invade you. And it's like, I don't know. I don't buy that at all. And I don't even think they were invaded because of anything having to do with NATO. I think they were just invaded because Yanukovych got ousted. That's what the timelines line up to and everything.
I think like I'm not sure that Russia would not have invaded if NATO was taken off the table. Like we can't know, but it's like, I think it was worth trying. I think there was inflexibility there. And then when it happened, I mean, we should have gone all in and actually helped Ukraine a lot earlier with a lot more weapons. I mean, we had this sort of boiling the frog kind of escalation thing. Maybe that was, I don't know. Like I think that they went too slow.
Yeah, that could have been a mistake. But why did we go too slow? It's because the fucking Republicans are insane about like making every single thing conditional on fucking everything, right? We had Ukraine weapons packages that were initially tied to fucking immigration bills that they killed themselves. Like,
yeah, I mean that's right. I mean, I think that So like but it's still Biden's. And well, actually, it's not that simple because a lot of Republicans at the start, in the first few months, they were often a lot more hawkish than Biden. A lot of the Republicans in Congress. Eventually, it became magnified, and it became like Trump just sort of said, what are we doing here? And they sort of started following Trump. But at least in the early on, I think Republicans were at least as hawkish as the Biden.
I think maybe early on, maybe yeah, but I'm putting together those kinds of deals where weapons are being shipped in and everything is happening would probably take more than just like a month because there are a lot of like logistics questions that have to be answered. Not just logistics, but like military conduct. Like you can't train people to fly F-16s in a month, right? And even knowing what the full scale of everything is going to be. And then also, I will say one more time, because I do feel very strongly about this. We don't have to get into the whole Ukraine-Russia history and all that. Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014 because Yanukovych was ousted in Euromaidan. It had nothing to do with NATO. That 100%, it was because Yanukovych was ousted, yeah. And then that whole war that they started in the southeast that had been waging on for a decade, like this is the same playbook that they ran basically in Georgia and similarly-ish in Moldova. These places weren't joining NATO. Like Russia just likes to bully their neighbors if they don't get exactly what they want. If they can't turn you into Belarus, then they're going to destroy you, right? That's what Russia does. I don't think having anything to do with NATO, those are all bullshit arguments put out by hack fucks like Mearsheimer and all the dick sucks that follow that dude. Because like you said earlier, the Baltics are bordering Russia. They're in NATO, right? Turkey fucking hates Russia. Turkey's in NATO. Like these other countries are in NATO. They're right now, Finland, right, is in NATO. Like they're next to Russia. Russia can deal with it. We can shoot missiles at Russia anyway. Ukraine being in NATO wouldn't have even been like when was the last time NATO has invaded Russia? This is a fake concern. I don't believe this. This is not real. This is not a motivating factor for them. They just want to exert control of their neighbors, I think.
Look, I think you're right about Russian intentions. Now the question is why they didn't do a full-scale invasion in 2016 or 2017, 2014. Why didn't they do a full scale like they did in 2022, where they tried to take Kiev, right? And I think it actually does matter. Like the details here do matter. Like I do think that the U.S., the U.S. basically coming closer to Ukraine, basically, a lot of training, a lot of sort of military entanglements. There was a lot of the stuff that Ukraine. I'm not justifying the invasion, but like Ukraine trying to Ukrainize the population, sort of banning Russian language and stuff like that. I do think that stuff matters. I do think that made the difference from like just being a bully and just being in Crimea versus trying to take over Ukraine. And so it's like
Absolutely
they're going to be bullies
not.
and they're going to
no shot. Them trying to ban propaganda stations that are broadcasting into their own territories from Russia and oligarchs. I don't think
it went beyond that. I mean, they went to the point where they were banning Russian schools. And
they never banned the Russian language. That's not true. They never did that in Ukraine.
They were banning Russian media. That's
oligarchical stations that were broadcasting propaganda into Ukraine proper.
You could not have media. I'll look this up because it was like a Voice of America article where you couldn't have a newspaper in Russian. Like, I'm not saying that doesn't justify invading Ukraine, obviously, but it went a lot further than just cracking down on oligarchs, which, probably is legitimate.
Sure. Even if I were to say maybe they did overstep maybe a little bit, I mean, like, you literally have a country next to you who's threatening oblivion on you, who is escalating war, because the whole war in the Donbass escalated from 2017 onwards. Russia became more and more active there. I'm trying to remember when that airliner was shot down. Over you,
the Malaysian one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like 2015, I think.
Maybe, yeah. But yeah, like, I mean, Russia just wants to bully. There's, regardless of any...
Russia wants to bully, but like there is like more than that. There is like a question of like why it happened then and like what we could have possibly done to avoid it. Like maybe, I don't know, like maybe we should have gone. I mean, Trump did start by giving Ukraine lethal aid. Like, do we give Trump credit for for sort of escalating the support for Ukraine?
No. Because he was doing it at the very same time that he was trying to dig up dirt on his political rivals. It's hard to give him any credit for his relationship with Ukraine there.
You're never happy.
I mean, he was impeached over it. Come on, those phone calls were great. That 47-minute phone call between Giuliani and Zelensky's aide, if anything ever existed like that. I'm sorry, yeah. I think Trump was the first guy who sold a whole bunch of weapons to Ukraine. I think it's good. I mean, I guess I would give him credit for that. I don't know if this was like a strategic...
I think on Israel too, on the Middle East. I mean, I think the Abraham Accords, I have an article on the Abraham Accords. They were, I mean, like people didn't think that this was something that was realistic. They basically, you could almost get a deal with Saudi, you can get a deal with UAE and Morocco, and what was the other one? Bahrain. This was impressive. I mean, the Saudi countries and Israel were united against Iran. Biden comes in, and there's a little bit of daylight, and it sort of all falls apart. Whether I do think, I mean, people sometimes say, oh, October 7th would have happened either way. I'm not sure, because I think the entire Hamas strategy was caring about human rights and sort of getting hiding behind civilians and basically relying on public opinion in the West, primarily America. And that's just not a realistic strategy with Trump in office versus Biden. I can't prove this, but I do think it made October 7th more likely.
If you have any writers or foreign policy experts, that don't want to fight with me on this, I will fight to the death on this. The Abraham Accords were not impressive. In my view, the Abraham Accords were a concession made to Israel. I think Netanyahu had basically all but announced that he was going to annex further parts outside of Jerusalem and Area C. I think it was Bahrain, I think, was the country that initially, I don't remember why it was them, like had huge issues with this. And then there was some back and forth fighting over it. And then basically Kushner saw an opportunity to come in here where people were fighting. It's like, okay, hold on. How about instead of Netanyahu, how about instead of you annexing like all these parts of Area C, what if we can like have more formalized peace, right? People, because we're Americans, like all the brown people are fighting, all the Jewish people and everybody in the Middle East is fighting. That's not really true. Israel has been like pretty stable in terms of enjoying stability in the Middle East. I would argue for probably the last like 30-ish years. They're not getting invaded. They don't see like all of their partners as wanting to fucking destroy them, right? Basically, they have Iran and Iranian proxies. So Hezbollah and Hamas. So the idea that like Saudi Arabia, Bahrain are like saying like, okay, Israel, let's formally have like a, like a peaceful arrangement is not that great when that was basically done to kick the can down the road on the Palestinian issues, which is what kind of led to things like October 7th, because Palestinians will continue to engage in terrorism if they feel like they're being ignored. And I mean, that's completely what happened. There was nothing in the Abraham Accords that was, penning in the Palestinians into any of this. They were, again, the can was kicked down the road. And it's not surprising that more terrorist attacks are going to happen. Like the whole border riots and everything were happening. The Great March of Return was all happening in 2019, I think. So no, I don't think that was, and I mean like Iran attacked Saudi Arabia in that time period. Like there was still stuff going on in Syria and Turkey. We had the whole thing with the abandoning the Kurdish allies there. We were still losing people in Afghanistan. Trump surrendered to the Taliban and kicked the can down the road for that into the Biden administration. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't think it was very impressive. Somehow he writes it as there were no wars or whatever, but like we were still bombing Yemen with Saudi Arabia. It was Biden that pulled us out of that. We still had a larger presence in Syria. That's why we were losing troops there. We were still in Afghanistan. He didn't negotiate that withdrawal under his term. Yeah. I don't know, man.
I'd love to continue the Israel debate. Actually, I've already got a hard stop. I got to go pick up my son.
Oh shit! Yeah, you're good. Okay.
Robot.
Yeah. If you ever want to chop on, also you can also or hop on. You can also just message me, and I'm always here to fight and everything. So I do appreciate the conversation, though. Thank you very much.
Yep. Enjoyed it.
Yeah. Have a good one. Peace out.
Later.
What's the phenomenon called where people seem reasonable and admit to all the bad shit the right does, but still go out and vote for Trump? I mean, I think he's probably heard a lot of bad stuff about the left, and maybe, I feel like for somebody like him, I feel like he's the best example of like, he's in a certain media environment. So like when I'm saying these things, it's hard because you guys listen to me all day, so you've heard the things that I say, and then you hear it over and over again. But what I just said there about the Abraham Accords, I don't think were that impressive. That's probably legitimately the first time he's ever heard that in his entire life, and then have somebody actually back that argument up. And when you've consumed countless media things talking about, like, what does Ben Shapiro say? Peace in the Middle East, peace in the Middle East. Peace. They all say that. Trump said that over and over again, peace in the Middle East. And then I say it, okay, well, who the fuck is this guy? Okay, like, that's cool that he has an opinion here, and maybe he's even backing up with a couple of facts or whatever, but like, he's a random streamer guy. Like, I've read this like 50 million times that this is peace in the Middle East. Like, why would I? So there's probably like that on like every single topic. So, but. He's ideologically opposed to unions and wokeness. I mean, like, being opposed ideologically to unions is weird. I would have to see what he says on that. But also, I mean, ideologically opposed to wokeness. Depends on how you define wokeness. I mean, like, I'm opposed to wokeness, but I'm also kind of woke. It just depends on what you talk about when you say that, I guess. But, okay. From the Bright Line Safety and Security Team. Railroad safety is a community-wide effort for everyone's safety. Never drive around crossing gates when they are down. Have you looked into the bird flu stuff? Alex Jones is promoting the idea that Biden is trying to make a COVID lockdown 2.0 to ruin Trump's term. That's great, and it won't happen, and no one will talk about it ever again.